passionate about finding the next it person. And whenever I speak to an audience, I feel like there's going to be somebody here who has potential to change the world. I really feel that way. Interestingly enough, when I was at UCLA, I felt that way, and one of the people who used to come to my class was Ben Shapiro. And he was just like one of my guys. And now I think he was, right? Yeah. Yeah, Grote. I'm Rabbi Klatzko says hi. Actually, I just met him in Jerusalem. And I think to myself, like, there's going to be another person in the room who maybe I'll be able to affect, and it's worth it flying out to Boca. So a little more background. I have 11 kids, thank God. I have 18 grandchildren, Baruch Hashem. So I'm an old man. We're a family that is very passionate about everything. We're passionate about music. We put out new music almost every week, and it gets played on the radio. We own an art gallery. We represent about 600 artists. My biggest passion, though, is to use technology to connect Jewish people. And because of that, I was involved with a lot of startups. Shabbat.com was one of them. Shabbat.com was something that spread around the globe, and it's now in 220 countries. And actually, I just showed, I forgot your first name. Zach. I just showed Zach. While we were speaking, 3 more people requested to come for Shabbos, just on the app, wanting to come. So I'm really passionate about that. And somebody noticed, because when you try to do good things, people notice, and the founder of WhatsApp called me and said, hey, I like what you're doing. He became my partner. So now us and Shabbat.com and WhatsApp, we're trying to spread Shabbat and also Jewish dating, which it does as well, around the world. So I'm very passionate about that. But I think the thing I'm most passionate about is finding the leader who one day will stand over here and inspire the next generation. Because let's face it, the middle section over here, we're on the other side of the hill. I can say it, I'm there, right? This is the future. They're the future. And they need to get it. Because as our sun sets a little, and as we sort of look back at what we've done in life, my wife always says there's nothing wrong with getting old as long as you have something to show for it. That's cool. But ultimately, it's going to be you guys. So what I want to share with you today is so basic that it almost seems silly to speak about it, but I promise you it's not. I was speaking to one of my students, and I was trying to tell him, why don't you go to one of these classes, learn a little about Judaism, and he said to me, well, I don't know if I even believe in God. So I screamed, so stop. He said, stop what? I said, just stop everything. He said, what do you mean stop? I said, stop everything. If you don't know whether God exists, so how can you do anything in life? Like, everything depends on whether we're born with purpose or whether we're an accident. What is not included in that umbrella? From the job that we take, to the way we raise our kids, to what we believe, to how we celebrate Shabbat, to who we marry, everything depends on whether the world is designed or the world is chaos. There's no question in the world more important than whether we're an accident or whether we're purposeful. So stop what you're doing, drop out of college, stop working, open up a book, learn, and make up your mind. What are you going to go all your life? I'm not sure if there is or there not, so I'll just drift through the rest of my life not being sure. That's sort of lame. That's not the way you go through life. You got to get clarity. So he thought I was dramatic, but he also accepted it. And he accepted it because I think, and looking by this group over here, nodding your heads, you guys get it. Yeah. You get it. If God exists, it changes the equation. It means that you're supposed to be here. There's someone connecting the dots. If God does not exist, then we're an accident of quantum fluctuation, and we're just chaos, and we'll devolve to chaos. So who cares what I eat? Who cares if I speak Lashon Hara? Who cares if I look at things I shouldn't look at, or if I hurt somebody, or if I steal? As long as I'm not, okay, I got to get along with people, but let's say I'm not hurting anyone in particular. Who cares? If God doesn't exist, the world is utterly different. And therefore, that's what we have to get clarity in. Now, I know that you're here because we believe that Hashem exists on some level, but I don't want you to believe it. I want you to have ammunition in your back pocket so that when you go out in the world, you can hammer the next guy in the same way that Ben hammers people in politics. I want you to hammer them with Hashem. I want you to be a hammer. I want you to be armed to the teeth. So what I want to give you today is lots and lots of ammunition. Now, what is the issue with God? Well, the fact that I don't see him is not an issue. Many things I don't see. I don't see molecules. I don't see atoms. The fact that I don't see the effect of God, that's false. If God is organization and chaos is chaos, I see organization. So, what's the issue? What's the issue? Why is it that in the olden days, if you believed in science, old days meaning going back 150, 200 years, and since then, or even before to Galileo times, that if you believed in science, you had to reject religion. So here's my little secret for you. That's Christianity. That ain't Judaism. That's the Christians. They were the ones who had issues with religion and science. We, Jews, are the opposite. We're the opposite. If it's science, give it to me. I studied science for almost 15 years. I love it. My kids study it. You know why? Because religion tells me why and science tells me how. They're not even doing the same thing. They're doing different things. Science will tell me how. How did this form? How does nuclear fusion work? How do we measure something in an absolute form? But science should not tell me why. Science oversteps its bounds when it says, and therefore you have no moral, you have no soul. Hello, that's not science anymore. Religion tells me why and science tells me how. So that's great. Give me more of the how. I want to know the how. You know why I want to know the how? Because if I know how God did something, then it makes me, listen up, it makes me appreciate God more. It makes me appreciate the world more. So many years ago, I mentioned Galileo. So he was a scientist who through his studies and through his research and through his observation, he said, guess what? The sun does not revolve around the earth, but rather the earth revolves around the sun. Okay, what revolves around what? Right? It's got the earth around the sun. He was right. The church says, take that back. Take it back. Because we'll kill you if you don't take it back. So what did Galileo do? He's a person of principle. What did he do? He took it back. He did take it back. But they didn't trust that he really meant it. So they imprisoned Galileo the rest of his life in a room. So Galileo was stuck in his room because of science. When Darwinism became a thing, and we say, oh wow, the life came through evolution, Christianity went running around scared. They began banning the books. Wow, if there is Darwinism, if there's evolution, then you don't need God. So therefore they pushed that away. Says who? That makes no sense. Maybe evolution is how God made it happen. And there's a mechanism for everything. Why can't that be one of the mechanisms? It boggles the mind why there has to be a fight. And interestingly enough, if you go back to the Talmud times, 200 years ago, 2,000 years ago, you will see many things that are mentioned in science today are mentioned in the Talmud. So we're going to cover some of them. We're going to cover some evolution. But I want to start with an interesting story. So one of the things I learned about famous people, so I was rabbi in Hollywood for many years. When I was in UCLA, I gave a class to the Hollywood people once a month. It was called the Hollywood class, and in order to be in my class, you have to be in the industry. So I had people who were writers, they were actors, they were producers, and a lot of famous people would come. Not going to name drop, but a lot of people came to the class, and it was fantastic that they would. And I'm still connected to them today, and it's been very helpful. We've done stuff with Netflix and so on. So when one of the things I learned about famous people is they have to eat. And they like good food just as much as you do. So if a person that you want to reach out to, you think they're ignoring you, offer them a steak dinner if you got the money for it. You will be shocked by how many yeses you get. So I'll give you an example. You guys, do you get these spam texts before an election? Vote this, vote for, go for this congressman, right? So now what I do is I have a copy and paste. I say, oh, thanks so much for messaging me. My name is Rabbi Klatzko. I own the world's largest Jewish social network. If the congressman would like to meet me, I'll be glad to take them to coffee or glad to take them to lunch. And guess what? They're all my friends now because they respond. Food talks. So when did this really come to the fore? Well, in 2016, there was discovery in science that may be one of the most important discoveries of your lifetime. And I'm not going to get technical because I'm going to lose you, but it's something called gravitational waves. Anyone familiar with gravitational waves? Not so much? That's okay. Okay. So gravitational waves was the fulfillment of one of the last theories of Einstein that Einstein said could never be proven. And the idea that since time and space are one fabric that we call space-time, that if there's a strong enough collision in space-time, if there's a big enough disturbance, you can actually create a ripple in time. Now, you may not notice a ripple in time, but it actually happens all the time. We lose milliseconds of life, or we gain milliseconds, but we don't notice it. But it happens. But it was theorized, and there were 3 laboratories that were built. And the laboratories were called LIGO, laser interferometer. Okay, so LIGO used 2 lasers, an X and Y axis, because light travels at a constant speed. And if the light from the X axis arrived before the y-axis, because they were in a 90-degree angle, then since light has to travel the same speed, if it reaches at one point before the other, it means that there was a ripple. Now, LIGO was originally thought of almost 40 years ago, and people's careers started and ended with nothing, meaning they didn't see any gravitational waves. And then, in 2016, they discovered the first gravitational wave. And that was a very big deal, because when you have gravitational waves, you can actually go back in time much closer to the Big Bang. Because we can't go further than 300,000 years after the Big Bang, because the photons were stuck in the primordial plasma. It's very, very hot. So you have to wait until it was cool enough for photons to go. So we can't see back further than 300,000 years after the Big Bang. But through gravitational waves, we can. So there was a scientist, I'm not going to name him right now. There was a scientist, and he was the head of LIGO. So I messaged him, and I said, hey, would you like to do lunch with me? I'm a rabbi, I live in New York, live in Muncie, and would you like to do lunch with me? When are you going to be in town? So he said, I'm a professor in Syracuse. The head of LIGO was also a professor. And he said, I am going to be in New York, in Manhattan, for a conference in a few months. I'll be glad to do lunch with you. Okay, I'm going to tell you his name. You can Google him. He has a TED Talk about his discovery of LIGO. His name is Peter Solson. The only reason it's important to know his name is because I assumed he was Italian, because I don't know, Solson, salsa, I don't know, something about the name. So I decided to take him to a pasta place in Manhattan, and I found a kosher pasta place, and I said, Peter, we're going to have dinner, and you're the head of LIGO, and whenever somebody, and he was up for a Nobel Prize, which it actually won the next year, I figured this will be cool. Future Nobel Prize winner, let's have some lunch together. We sat down, and I began to pepper him with questions, and then I said to him, question, what happened the moment gravitational waves was discovered? What was your reaction? You waited 40 years. Now, he wasn't there all 40 years. Whenever he began his career, it was in the middle of LIGO. What was your first reaction? So he said, well, actually, gravitational waves were discovered on Rosh Hashanah, and I was in temple. I said, 1 second, you're a Jew? I said, okay, that figures. Scientist, yeah. He said, and I don't bring my phone to synagogue because I don't interrupt the service. So I left it at home. So my phone was blowing up with emails congratulating me, and I didn't even know about it because my phone was home. And then after Rosh Hashanah, I discovered it, and it was really amazing. So I said, what was your first reaction? What was your first reaction? And you know what he told me? Peter Solson. First reaction, gravitational waves. He said, my first reaction was, I went out and bought a mezuzah and tefillin. I said, 1 second, you're about to win a Nobel Prize for proving Einstein's theory. Why is that your first reaction? Tefillin and a mezuzah? He said, because after gravitational waves have been proven, if you don't believe in God, you shut off your brain. Because gravitational waves prove the cosmological constant. Now, what is that? There are certain constants in the universe. Constants mean that they are reliable equations that don't make sense. I'll give you an example. We'll get a little bit technical. So there are 4 forces that are the vanguard of all science in our universe. They're called the strong nuclear, the weak nuclear, the magnetic, and gravity. So let me ask you something. Is gravity a strong force or a weak force?
Strong.
Strong, right? Well, I'm going to show you something. Ready? A demonstration. Here we go. Ready? Watch this. Watch this. Here we go. You guys saw that? What did I just do? I just fought gravity of the entire Earth. Earth was pulling this down. The entire weight. This is fact. The Earth was pulling this down, and I beat Earth. L'chaim. How did I beat Earth? The answer is gravitational force is an incredibly weak force. It's so weak that there are even theories in science that part of the force must be siphoned off to another dimension because it doesn't make sense that it's so weak. And yet, it's strong enough to create nuclear fusion, which creates suns and stars, which creates heavy elements, which creates you and I. So it's so weak that I can beat it, and yet it's so strong that it could collapse into a black hole. So I don't get it. Is gravity strong or weak? The answer is that gravity is dialed in to an incredibly precise number. The measurement of gravity is so delicate in the universe that if it would be off in 1 part in 10 to the 18th, well, what does 10 to the 18th look like? So ready? Let's put it as 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 18, right? If it was off in 1 part in 10 to the 18th, we would lose the world. We would lose the universe. How did we happen to end up in a universe that was dialed in a way that there's no lottery? You'd have to win the lottery multiple times to equal 10 to the 18th. And yet the world we're living in, gravity is dialed in perfectly. Not 1 iota more, not 1 iota less. Now that could be an accident. Those who don't believe in God, they say, well, that's an accident. We got lucky. 1 second. That's luck. There's another force. And the other force is called dark energy. Dark energy plus dark matter equal 95% of the mass of the universe. Without that, we would all collapse. There's dark energy between us right now. How dialed in does dark energy need to be in order for the universe not to be destroyed? 1 part in 10 to the 120. Now, if you want to know what's 1 part in 10 to the 120, that's too big. That number's 10, that means 1 with 120 zeros. If it's off by 1 part in 1 to the 20th, we have no universe. How big is that number? So, if I would have a pin in front of me, how many atoms are at the tip of the pin? About 10 to the 20th. There's so many atoms. Atoms are so small. How many atoms are there in a cup of water? How many atoms are there in the entire universe? And the universe is about 93 billion light years from end to end. How many atoms are there in the universe? About 10 to the 82nd. That means you have a better chance of identifying 1 atom in the universe than for the universe to exist. Much better chance. Because every time you add 1 zero, it's exponentially bigger. So there's a big difference between 10 to the 80 and 10 to the 120. We should not be here. And that's called the cosmological constant. And all of those people who go around on campus, because I'm a campus rabbi, and they say, well, I'm an atheist. I said, oh, that's interesting. What books have you read? Just curious. Really, an atheist? Really? Like, what's your argument? Well, I don't see God. Really? That's your big argument? Do you see atoms? Do you see air? Do you see dark matter? Well, I think we don't need God. Cosmological conscience says that we do need God, because our world should not exist. Now, one last thing, and then we'll get out of the weeds. Those avowed atheists who really just hate the idea of God, they know this is a big issue. The cosmological constant for all those atheists is a huge issue. Our world shouldn't exist, because don't forget, in the same universe that gravity has to be dialed in, dark matter has to be dialed in. So 10 to the 120th and 10 to the 18th have to fall out on the same universe. And it's a lot more constant than those. So what do they say? Well, maybe there are many universes. If there are many universes, then we happen to be in the universe that happened to strike gold. And all the other universes, the cosmological constant didn't fit, and those universes actually exploded, and we're the only universe that survived. Does that make sense? Multiverse. It doesn't, because whatever creates a multiverse needs to have a constant also. Okay, we're not going to get into that, but let's backtrack a little, okay? So this guy Peter Solson, he comes to me and he says, you know what? I've got tefillin, I got mezuzah. A few weeks later, Peter Solson's wife knocks on our door.